Berlin did the unthinkable. After years of hesitation, shielded by pleas for restraint, Germany crossed a line once considered sacred in Europe. In October 2025,
not theoretical, not under consideration, signed, sealed, pointed toward the front. The announcement carried the weight of timing as much as money, landing during an EU-NATO defense summit.
This was not just aid. It was a declaration that the era of waiting and asking permission was over. Berlin, which had long avoided a military role, was now rewriting Europe's rules of defense. Allies were surprised. Moscow was furious. Washington was silent. And Kyiv could only watch with disbelief. The sky no longer belonged to the past, but to those who dared to act first. Don't look away, because what happens next will change Europe's security map forever. For 8 decades, Germany lived in the shadow of history. Since the World War, every military decision has been bound by 2 words: caution. Berlin was accustomed to speaking through declarations rather than actions, with slow aid, late signings, always fearing that one wrong step could awaken the memory of the whole of Europe. But the war in Ukraine reversed everything. In the skies above the ruined cities, battlefield drones worth only a few $1,000s could penetrate air defense systems valued at millions. Each low-cost attack forced the defender to pay 100-fold to intercept. That is the new paradox of the 21st century. In low-cost warfare, the intelligent beat the strong. Ukraine knew this well, but they needed technology, persistence, and a partner bold enough to dare to change. The US had the resources, the UK had the experience. But only Germany possessed something its 2 allies did not: the ability to turn cost into a weapon. In research institutes in Munich and Bonn, young German engineers began asking a seemingly simple question: how can we defend effectively without paying the price of bankruptcy? And it was from this question that, in 2025, Berlin decided to step out of its comfort zone. Instead of donating batch by batch, they chose co-creation. Instead of sending weapons, they brought an industrial model. That was when the concept of defense cost sustainability was born, a strategy where software, data, and alliance replaced sheer scale and money. But what Germany was about to introduce next was not just a weapon, but a system smart enough to change the entire way the world understands modern warfare. In May 2025, Berlin and Kyiv signed a quiet agreement that would later be seen as the true turning point in the European war. Germany did not just provide aid, it decided to share technology, data, and an entirely new defensive philosophy. In workshops from Dusseldorf to Bavaria, production lines were restarted, creating a generation of weapons no longer based on mechanical power, but on software and the ability to self-learn. The core of the program was a multi-layered air defense network where Patriot secured the high altitude, Iris-T held the medium range, and Skynex covered the low altitude. All were connected by battlefield control software, allowing units to operate independently yet coordinate as a single unified body. When one area was attacked, others automatically compensated, creating an unprecedented distributed air defense system. Each interception was no longer an instinctive reaction, but the result of precise calculations on cost and effectiveness, true to the spirit of intelligent deterrence that Berlin pursued. However, Germany's strategy didn't stop at defense. They financed Ukraine's construction of long-range battlefield drone production lines, inexpensive UAVs capable of reconnaissance, attack, and learning after every mission. Each flight carried not only explosives, but also brought back data, the fuel for self-improving algorithms. Berlin called this thinking weaponry, while Kyiv simply called it intelligent hope. Thanks to the joint production model, new factories in Lviv and Vinnytsia allowed Ukraine to repair, upgrade, and deploy weapons right at the battlefield. Every piece of equipment could be updated with software in just a few hours. What once required international aid could now be done with a click. That was the leap from aid in batches to industrial self-reliance, helping Kyiv sustain the fight without being crushed by costs. For Ukraine, this was survival. But for Germany, this was a statement. Victory in the 21st century comes not from large stockpiles, but from flexible software, precise data, and costs calculated by logic, not by blood. But precisely when the economic equation was solved, another paradox emerged. The attacker began paying the price for their own bullets. In modern warfare, the winner is not necessarily the one who shoots faster, but the one who forces the opponent to spend more for every attack. When Germany's multi-layered air defense system became operational, this rule became starkly apparent. A $10,000 UAV was shot down by an interceptor costing only $4,000. A multi-million-dollar cruise missile was neutralized by an IRIS-T round that cost 10 times less. In this game of cost exchange, the defender was cheaper than the attacker for the first time, but the true strength lay in the speed of adaptation. When the adversary changed frequencies, the software updated within hours. When the attack tactics shifted, the system self-learned on the spot. The war was no longer fought with bombs and bullets, but with data that was learning every second. From here, the defense equation was reweighted. Ukraine's total operating cost decreased by tens of percent, while its interception efficiency increased many times over. Defense cost sustainability, a phrase once theoretical, had become reality. For Berlin, this was not only a military achievement, but also an economic turning point. Every euro of aid now became an investment. Factories, software, data, and people together created a profitable defense infrastructure. A model where civilian and military industries merged into one, both protecting Europe and fueling its own economy. That is intelligent deterrence. Instead of countering with sheer numbers, Germany forced the adversary into exhaustion through cost. When the attacker's costs rose faster than their will, the war automatically slowed down. But every new technology brings with it the old question. If the cost of war becomes too cheap, where will humanity know where to stop? The systems deployed by Germany in Ukraine were designed not to create a victory overnight, but to extend the ability to survive in a war of attrition. Their targets were not ballistic missiles or bombers, but battlefield drones, low-altitude munitions, and loitering munitions, the cheap, fast, and hard-to-detect tools that have defined the modern front line. Each radar, each Skynex or IRIS-T launcher operates like an eye in a distributed air defense network. When a UAV appears, the system no longer relies on human reaction. The battlefield control software receives data from hundreds of sensors, analyzes the trajectory, compares signals, and selects the optimal interception method. The cycle from detection to neutralization takes mere seconds, faster than the reaction speed of a seasoned pilot. This is an efficiency that was previously only theoretical. Thanks to this approach, the average interception rate in the protected areas increased by over 40% compared to before, while the operating cost was nearly halved. For Kyiv, this was a life and death change, a system that could operate for months without massive resource depletion. Every industrial area, power plant, and logistics route is now under a defense dome that is cheaper, more flexible, and self-recovers faster after each attack. The boundary of control. However, even this precision carries its own limits. When a network is largely controlled by algorithms, the risk of error and intervention becomes more real than ever. Jamming, spoofing, or cyber attacks can cause the system to misidentify targets. A cleverly implanted false signal is enough to force the radar to expend multiple inexpensive interceptors, and just a few such errors can disrupt the entire process. Therefore, no matter how far technology advances, a human control layer still exists in every procedure, the person who makes the final decision before the system fires. Beyond technical risk, the limit also lies in the political factor. When Berlin announced the removal of range restrictions for the donated weapons, NATO was silent, but European capitals felt uneasy. They understood the importance of intelligent deterrence, but also feared that crossing a red line could push the entire region into an escalating spiral. In closed-door meetings, diplomats admitted the new Germany is acting faster than diplomacy can keep up. As for Kyiv, they have no choice. Every meter of protected airspace is an hour of survival for the city, the power plant, and the children in the hospital. They call these systems the low-cost dome, a symbol of the belief that technology can change the balance of war without escalating violence. But every technology has ethical limits. When weapons can automatically identify and fire in seconds, people begin to ask, where is the line between automation and responsibility? An algorithm can learn how to save costs, but can it understand restraint? In a world where battlefield control software is increasingly intelligent, the most crucial task returns to the simplest thing, keeping humans at the center of the decision-making process. The effectiveness has been proven, the scope expanded, but the limits remain not in the technology, but in our ability to control what we create. And this is the biggest ethical question that Berlin, Kyiv, and the whole world must face. When weapons start to think, who will teach them to stop? By the end of 2025, as the winter winds swept across the fields of eastern Ukraine, the sky still lit up with hundreds of streaks of intercepting fire. But this time, it was not just a sight of war, it was the sign of a new era. An era where victory is no longer measured by the number of missiles fired, but by the ability to control cost, software, and the alliance network. In less than a year, Berlin moved from being Europe's most cautious nation to the centerpiece of collective defense strategy. The air defense systems, UAVs, and battlefield control networks funded by Germany created a shield that protected not only Kyiv, but also the credibility of the NATO alliance. For the first time in decades, Europe had an industrial powerhouse ready to lead with responsibility, not with words, but with action. But what surprised the world was not the money or the weapons. What made everyone reflect was how Germany did it, not loudly, not with threats, but with persistence and precision. Instead of an arms race, they chose intelligent deterrence, forcing the attacker to question whether the next strike was worth the price. In this model, cost became the new ethical barrier, compelling the war to slow down before human control was lost. The technology Berlin brought was not perfect. There are still limits, still debates, and still the fear of escalation. But it proved one crucial thing. Ingenuity can change the rules of power. In a world where machines are increasingly smart, it is humanity, with restraint and a sense of responsibility, that determines whether technology serves peace or prolongs conflict. From Munich to Warsaw, from Kyiv to Washington, policymakers began viewing the German model not just as a military solution, but as a new economic and social template: distributed defense, cost, sustainability, and responsible technology. In this model, every factory, every data center, and every engineer works not to destroy, but to maintain order, deterrence, and stability. Berlin's rise does not mark a return to the past, but the maturation of the present. A Germany that has learned to lead without imposing, to protect without dominating. They understand that status comes not from absolute strength, but from the ability to use that strength to prevent chaos. As the German radars continue to sweep the cold sky and the power stations they helped restore remain lit throughout the winter, people realize that in the darkness of war, there is still another kind of light, the light of responsibility and reason. The war will eventually end, but the legacy Germany leaves behind may shape Europe's security future for decades to come. Not a legacy of bullets, but a legacy of mindset, how to be strong without losing humanity, and how to protect peace with technology, not with fear. If you are watching this video, leave your thoughts below. Is the intelligent deterrence model truly the path to long-lasting peace, or just a temporary balance before a new storm? Because in a world where machines are learning to think, true power is not the ability to fight, it is the ability to prevent war from starting.